Good afternoon. I'm Lloyd Knight, your Vet Talks moderator for this afternoon. For those who don't know me, I'm a retired Air Force Loadmaster and First Sergeant, Director of International Air Freight Trade Lane Management at UPS, and co-founder and president of VetAtlanta. Thank you for joining this very first ever episode of VetAtlanta Vet Talks in collaboration with the Veterans Administration. For those joining us from around the country on Zoom, we're coming to you live from UPS Global Headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. I'd like to wish a warm welcome to our distinguished guests from the VA, leadership from VetAtlanta, our Vet Talk speakers, those joining us on Zoom, and my fellow UPSers. Thank you, UPS, for hosting, and to the UPS volunteers who made this event become reality. At UPS, we recently celebrated our 112th birthday. We were founded in Seattle, Washington in 1907 when our founder, Jim Casey, took a $100 loan and started a messenger service. Today, we operate in more than 220 countries and have 480,000 employees. In 2018, I received the highest award at UPS, which is named after our founder, Jim Casey, and it's given to one employee each year to recognize community service. My community service efforts have always been focused around collaboration, as collaboration is extremely vital in supporting our communities, as no one person or no one organization can go it alone. The issues our veterans face today cannot be fixed just by the government. Solutions must be developed and implemented by collaborative partnerships. And today's event is a wonderful example of VetAtlanta's collaboration, showcasing partnerships between corporate America, the government, academia, and nonprofit sectors. For those of you who may not be familiar with VetAtlanta, we are a club based in Atlanta, Georgia. We were founded 6 years ago by a small group of employees from several Atlanta-based Fortune 500 companies out of their Veterans Business Resource Groups. We are chartered as a club, and our charter does not allow us to accept or distribute funds of any kind. So we're focused on collaboration and volunteerism. Today, we have over 2,000 members, and our mission is to make Atlanta the premier community of the entire country for veterans to work and live. For more information, check us out at vetatlanta.org. The percentage of Americans who serve in the military today is the lowest in our nation's history. With base consolidations, post-9/11 security measures, repeated deployments, and an all-voluntary force, most civilians have been isolated from service members and military culture. Meanwhile, many studies show the majority of Americans report viewing veterans as either broken victims or some kind of war heroes, when reality is most veterans are regular citizens who have a tremendous life experience that only a few can understand. Research shows that veterans are more civically engaged in their communities, voting, volunteering, and serving their communities at a higher rate than their civilian counterparts. Most civilians don't understand why that is. VetAtlanta and Vet Talks aims to change that. Vet Talks gives veterans the opportunity to share their personal stories of inspiration and accomplishments since leaving the military with their neighbors in the community, bridging the civilian-military divide. Today, we have 5 amazing veterans executives joining us to provide their perspective on how their military experience helped them climb the corporate ladder. Kicking off Vet Talks, our first speaker is Mark Robinson. Mark is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran where he served as tank commander from 1984 to 1988 and now serves as the president of UPS Capital. Mark won the 2009 Risk and Insurance Magazine Risk Innovator Award and has been actively involved in community service for many years, including executive advisor of the veteran programs at UPS, president for the Epilepsy Foundation of Georgia, and board observer for Cabbage. Mark earned a bachelor's degree in marketing from California State University, a master's degree in management from National University in San Diego, and completed executive education programs at the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, and the University of Virginia Darden Graduate School of Business Administration. It's my great privilege to welcome to the stage Mark Robinson.
Thank you, Lloyd. Well, it's my pleasure to be here today. If you happen to see me around the UPS building, any time in the last 30 years, if you saw me walk around, you'd say, "Hey, Mark, how you doing?" Because at UPS, we call everybody out on a first-name basis. And it's a tradition that's gone back all the way to the very beginning of UPS. But if you talked to me maybe about 31 years ago, no one even knew my first name. My name was Sergeant Robinson, United States Marine Corps. I knew I'd get at least one. And it's been a long time since I've done that, so it feels pretty good. But I was coming out of the Marine Corps as a sergeant. I was a tanker, Eagle Globe and Anchor, Marine Corps tanker. And I was just starting to work at UPS. And I found myself very well prepared to start working at UPS. But before I tell you about that, I just want to rewind a little bit and talk about how I came to be in the Marine Corps in the first place. And I went into the Marine Corps when I was in high school, and I was not particularly a good student. My parents wanted me to go to college. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't really like school that much, except for we got to play sports. So I kept my grades up so I could play sports. Really didn't spend a lot of time doing homework. And I was basically just someone you look at and say that basically a person is unmotivated and isn't really doing anything with themselves and isn't really going anywhere. And that's where I was when I was 18 years old. So I kind of had a little reality check. I knew, my game plan wasn't that great. And, my parents were telling me, look, you need to go to college. I was like, well, if I was going to do that, I would have had to start doing homework like 2 years ago. But what I did do is when I turned 18 years old, I decided to go on down to the Marine Corps recruitment center, and I signed up to do a 4-year enlistment in the Marine Corps. And I just decided to do it, and I really didn't tell anybody. So I remember coming home that day, sitting down for dinner, and then my dad said, "So, Mark, what'd you do today?" And I said, "Well, it's funny that you should ask, Dad, because today I joined the Marine Corps." And my mom started to cry, and then my dad said, "Oh, thank God." So I had like 50% approval rating on that. But I think the reason that my dad said that is because he knew that I needed to do something with myself, and I didn't really have a good game plan. So I finished high school, graduated, and a couple months later I went off into the Marine Corps, not really knowing what to expect, except watch A Few Good Men, Sands of Iwo Jima, different ways to try to figure out what you're getting yourself into. But what I found out was that it was like getting thrown into the deep end. My lack of discipline was not really appreciated at all in the Marine Corps, which really is known for its discipline. And immediately in entering boot camp, I remember just people are just yelling at you and making you run all around and doing all kinds of crazy things. The physical requirements were ridiculous, just push-ups and bends and thrusts and all this other stuff. Today we call them burpees. But we just do all this designed to break you down and to test you and to then rebuild you. And I think that what I ended up getting out of the Marine Corps was the fundamentals. The job skills, I was a tanker. I drove around and I blew stuff up. When you go into the civilian world and they said, well, what are you good at? I'm like, well, I can drive a tank. I can blow stuff up. I can fix it. It doesn't really translate. But the leadership translates and some of the other pieces translate. And I think of being in the Marines, it's kind of like being in a river with a swift current. If you get into the Marines and you turn around and you try to swim up the current as hard as you can, it's going to be a long, tough 4 years. But if you turn around the other way and you really embrace it and swim with it, it can really take you a long way. And I found that in the Marine Corps, I was given a lot of responsibility at a young age. 18 years old, 19 years old. I think 19 years old, I was a gunner on a tank, a main gun round, 105 millimeter main gun round going down range. 19 years old. So, in fact, my pictures up here back is, you'll see it's on my tank. 29 Palms, California, that's me on the upper left, right behind that green flag. I was a tank commander. I think I was 20 at that time. But what I learned is that you could push yourself physically beyond whatever you thought you could do. And a lot of the Marines that you're with, they really become your friends. You're with them all day long when you work. You're with them when you're not at work. You're with them on the weekends. You go everywhere together. And they really become like your brothers. And what we did is we pushed each other all the time. How much weight could you lift? How far could you run? Who could you go faster than the other guy? So there was really a lot of physical preparation and physical conditioning that went way beyond anything that I was able to do before I went into the Marines. And the physical piece is combined together with the mental part. All during that time, I was challenged mentally. I can remember one time we were in a deployment in Norway, and it went on for like 2 weeks. Every day we set up the tanks in the daytime, we moved them at night. Well, if you're a tanker, you're a tank fixer. So if we moved them at night, we're fixing them in the morning. So just very little sleep, day after day, navigating all around. This was before GPS. It was before GPS, before the internet, before cell phones. That was the environment that I was in. You have a compass, doesn't really work on a tank, it's too much metal. And what I learned is that combination of the physical preparation, the mental preparation, and the discipline helped me when I left the Marines to be able to get myself through college relatively quickly. I was able to, with the physical aspect, nothing that I did at UPS was harder than what I did in the Marines. No business problem or anything ever came up that was harder than what I had done mentally to get through it in the Marine Corps. It's the discipline to get to work on time, to get to school on time, to finish your work, to be the best you can, and don't let any physical or don't let any mental challenge get in your way. And today, in my role now, I have the opportunity to bring a lot of folks into the company and start their career at UPS. And what I look for is I look for people, if I find a veteran, I know I'm getting someone that has that physical toughness, that mental toughness, and that discipline and preparation that can really help them and really help us get through the kind of business problems that we have today. So in closing, my Marine Corps experience was really fundamental to my development as an individual. It was absolutely set me up for success in my corporate life, and I sincerely hope that all those of you who are listening today and watching today experience a similar kind of success as well. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker, Dr. Vivian Greentree, is Senior Vice President and the Head of Corporate Citizenship at Fiserv. Before joining Fiserv, Vivian helped to found Blue Star Families, where she was also a Director of Research and Policy. Previously, Vivian served as Supply Corps Officer in the U.S. Navy on active duty and in the reserves. She holds a PhD in Public Administration and Urban Policy from Old Dominion University, a master's degree from the University of Maryland, University College, and an undergraduate degrees in Journalism and Public International Affairs from the University of Georgia. She's also a 2019 Presidential Leadership Scholar participant. Vivi and I have run in the same circles for several years now, and I can tell you she is passionate as she is smart, and the veteran and veteran spouse community is blessed to have her a member and staunch advocate. Please welcome Dr. Vivian Greentree to the stage.
Hi, y'all. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today, especially here in Georgia, in Atlanta. A little bit about myself. My name is Vivian Greentree. I have two boys, 13 and 15. I'm a Navy veteran, a military spouse. Our favorite child, though, is our dog, Scout Greentree, probably because she likes to karaoke with me, unlike my two-legged children. I'm the head of corporate citizenship at Fiserv, recently merging with First Data to become the largest fintech in the planet, moving money at the speed of life. And life moves pretty fast, as Ferris Bueller said. And I'm from Tucker, big town right outside Atlanta. Went to Tucker High School, just like my mom. Went to the University of Georgia, graduated, got into the Navy. I served on active duty and in the reserves as a Navy Supply Corps officer. Met a Navy guy. They're really cute in their aviation gear. Got married, had some kids, had some moves, had some deployments, And now, 20 years later, he's about to retire, and where do you think we chose the first time to live when a detailer wasn't involved? Atlanta. Because it's physically great to be here with you because my parents are 20 miles down the road instead of 600 miles down the road. And especially to talk about turning service into success. Because when you think about, when I think about the lessons that I learned in the Navy that have translated far past my service, well, first of all, the Navy taught me to cuss. I mean, I knew how to cuss. They taught me to cuss effectively. I definitely learned how to cuss watching football with my granddad. But I think the Navy, and I don't think that's singular to any branch, raises profanity to a completely different level that makes our parents cringe, and sometimes even my sailor husband. But more broadly than that, different conversation. A military connectedness, not just as a service member, but a military spouse, for our military parents, our military children, our caregivers, our advocates. I think that military connectedness, and I use that term very purposefully, because the military experience enlarges and broadens what it means to be a citizen in a way that is transferable, again, way past service to everything and every facet that we do. For example, resiliency. Resiliency is learned and gained through charting difficult waters, not the easy ones. And we know that ships in harbors are safe, right? But that's not why we have ships. Eminently transferable. I learned that in a world where you show up as a newly minted ensign or maybe a new military spouse, maybe a new military kid at a new school, and you can't control a lot, you don't know a lot, there are three things that you can always show up with: your attitude, your effort, and your kindness. Eminently transferable. I learned that diversity is a fact. The military is the most diverse population we have. Diversity is a fact, but that inclusion is a choice. And that teams that choose inclusion are better for it. Eminently transferable. And then I learned, like many Navy sailors before me, the importance of charting, of picking my North Star, and then charting my course against that, regardless of where I was in the world. And so I want to talk a little bit about that North Star. My North Star is a patriotism of benevolence. That is a fancy sociologist term, which really means that my patriotism is a patriotism born in the love of my fellow countrymen and women, and the idea that my well-being is tied to your well-being, and your well-being is tied to my well-being, and we have a responsibility towards each other. And when you think about our national motto, E pluribus unum, that's right, Latin. Navy, we know Latin. From many one. And that's really the distillation of the American experience, the idea of this melting pot, and that from many come one. And that's also, by the way, encapsulates the military experience in that if you're chipping the deck on a ship, how does that contribute to mission readiness? If you're struggling to survive a deployment with small kids where you feel alone, how does that support mission readiness? Everything that we did connected to the military played into a role larger than ourselves and an outcome larger than we could ever have accomplished alone. And that's a very powerful mentality. That's a very powerful national resource. And it's important to remember that because there are challenges that we know that are associated with military service, right? The real wear and tear on our military families after 15 plus years of war. We were babies with our baby in that photo. But the very real wear and tear on military families. But I think that there's a greater cost to the country when a majority of citizens aren't thinking about the well-being of our fellow citizens and countrymen and women. And I am grateful that as my children see my husband serving and others volunteering to serve, that they see citizenship through the lens of responsibility and not just opportunity. And so when you think about translating service to success, to me it is easy like a Sunday morning, which karaoke, I would have sang, had a little bit of cough, so would have embarrassed us all. But if you're looking for teammates, you look to the military community. If you're looking for leaders, you look to the military community, because we have developed an esprit de corps based on overcoming obstacles together through teams, creating something that none of us could separately. My North Star comes back to the idea predicated that any definition of a successful life has to include service, much like President George H.W. Bush said. And that companies and communities that recognize this vital national renewable resource of a patriotism of benevolence and create open cultures where everyone feels they have an equitable opportunity to join, belong, contribute, progress, will win social capital and human capital. And at the end, it comes back to service. Maybe a little karaoke, definitely some cussing, but in a world that continues to be volatile and full of chaos, if you show up every day and every way with attitude, effort, and kindness, driven by your North Star of serving others, you will be successful by any definition of the word. Thank you so much for having me.
Bill Dyer is a partner in the Atlanta office of Lee and Hayes, LLP, where he is National Chair of the Intellectual Property Litigation Practice. He's a frequent lecturer on the intellectual property topics and has been a faculty member of the National Trial Advocacy College at the University of Virginia School of Law and is a member of the Georgia Bar. Bill earned a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the Virginia Military Institute in 1985 and a law degree from Cumberland School of Law at Samford University in 1992. His military education includes a master's in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College and the Advanced Joint Professional Military Education course, U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, and the Judge Advocate Officer Basic and Advanced courses. General Dyer was initially commissioned in the U.S. Air Force, which we got to wonder about his judgment a little bit if he went from the Air Force into the Army. And he served on the, just kidding, served on the base engineering staff at Lowry Air Force Base, Colorado. Following graduation from law school, he commissioned in the Army and served 4 years on active duty at Fort Gordon, Georgia, as legal assistant, attorney, and trial defense counsel. He moved to the U.S. Army Reserves and has filled a wide range of positions and is now the Assistant Judge Advocate General for Military Law and Operations. Please join me in welcoming General Dyer to the stage.
Good afternoon. So the theme this afternoon is how my military service has impacted my civilian career. And I'll get to that in a minute. But first I have a question for you. What is your currency? What is your personal currency? When you have a task ahead, when you have to lead a group or an organization, what is it within you that you draw on? What do you call upon to accomplish that mission, to meet that objective? Is it a title? A title that you've learned, or earned rather, through years of sustained excellence? You're a team leader, a manager, a director, a vice president, you're a CEO. Is it that title and your place on the org chart with all those boxes arrayed under you that conveys to everyone that you've earned the ability to lead? Is it a reputation? Do you have the Midas touch? Do you have the ability as a business savant to look through layers of complexity and uncertainty, to understand how to take a business unit and turn it around, to make it profitable, to create value for your team, for your company, and for your shareholders? Would you follow a leader who held a position that was rightly earned at the top of an organization because of a title? Would you follow a leader who had a well-earned reputation for being able to take a difficult business situation and turning that into profit? Sure you would. Of course you would. But let's talk about the difference between following a leader because of one of those reasons and following the kind of leader who would make you run through a brick wall for him or her. The kind of leader that would make you leave everything on the field, give every ounce of your capability, of your strength toward that cause. I want you to imagine a leader whose currency is values. Loyalty, duty, respect, self-sacrifice, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Imagine a leader who lived those values, who led by those values. Now, if you've been in the military, I know a few things about you. I have a pretty good idea what your underwear drawer looks like. Fold, 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 stack. I have a pretty good idea that before you left the house this morning, you looked down at the tips of your shoes to make sure there was polish on them. I know these things because the military hard bakes into us certain things. It weaves them into our being. Most of the things that it weaves into our being are inconsequential, invisible, not really noticeable, but some are much more significant. And from your first day at basic training, your first day in OCS, ROTC, your first day at the academy, whatever your pathway into the military, you began to learn about military values. You heard about them, you saw them in practice, you were rewarded when you espoused them, when you exhibited them, and they followed you all the way through. That's why our military units are able to accomplish the otherwise unaccomplishable. That's why they don't just survive and do okay in austere environments. They excel in austere environments. And I know this about you. Those values have been hard baked into you. And I know it primarily because of me. I am the most ordinary of men. I am not particularly talented. I have no great gifts, at least not that I've discovered yet. But somehow, somewhere along the line in my military service, certain things became hard-baked into me. I do have one very organized underwear drawer. My shoes always look good, but beyond that, I discovered that the values that I picked up along the way stood me in good stead. They allowed me first to become an excellent follower, to understand my place in an organization, to understand that at that level that I was at, that junior level, I could properly follow. My values eventually allowed me to be recognized as a valuable teammate, as someone that people wanted on their side when things got tough. And that felt good, to be the one who was picked to be on the team, who was valued as part of the team. And then eventually, when it came my time to lead, I was fortunate to be an effective leader, in large part because of those values. Not because of being named a partner at some big international law firm, not because I could go into court, stand before a judge or jury and develop or deliver great results for my clients. Not even because Congress and the president decided to give me a certain military rank. It was my values. When you leave here and you look at a veteran, values are what you see. When you hire a veteran, values are what you get. And if you've been fortunate enough to wear the uniform, values are who you are. And I know that because values are who I am. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joe Dan Banker. Joe is interim deputy commissioner of the Technical College System of Georgia and served over 20 years in the United States Navy. Joe is a graduate from the University of Texas and earned a degree in physiological psychology. And wow, that's hard to say. He also earned a master's degree in political science, civil and international affairs from the United States Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, where he went on to be a faculty member. Following retirement, Joe Dan moved to Georgia and served as the senior naval science instructor and commander of the Naval Junior ROTC unit at Lee County High School, director for continuing education and business and industry services at Albany Technical College, dean for academic affairs and vice president for academic affairs at Albany Technical College, and executive director of the Technical College System of Georgia as the executive director for academic affairs. He was named assistant commissioner for workforce development for the Technical College System of Georgia in February 2018, and recently took on the additional duties of interim deputy commissioner for the system. Please welcome Joe Dan Baker to the stage.
Good afternoon. I don't know how I'm going to follow those three. Most of what they said, everything what they said, I think I have to, and now I have to look at myself the whole time. I didn't know these pictures were down here. I'll just start off. When I was growing up, very early on in life, I wanted to be a Viking. You know, going out to sea in a little rowboat, basically, with axes and stuff like that, man, that was exciting. But shortly after that, I kind of realized there were no new openings in the world of Vikings. And so growing further on, I was just going to follow in my dad's footsteps. He was a medical doctor. My mother was a registered nurse. And so that's what I was going to be. I was going to be a doctor. And everybody would kind of look at me and nod, but no one really got excited about it. I went to college, University of Texas, and one day I was running, exercising, and it was during the monsoon seasons in Austin, Texas. They come through and it'll rain, it'll be so hard you can't see. And I was running near the football stadium, so I ducked into this tunnel, you know, the tunnels that the Warriors run through to go out and play football. And so I was standing inside there waiting for the rain to stop, and I heard this clacking noise just over and over and kind of voices. So I went to the other end, and out in the middle of the football field in this pouring down rain was the Army and the Navy ROTC units, and they were doing rifle drills. And the drill instructors all had their, you know, umbrellas and everything, and they were out in their uniforms just standing, just getting soaked in the rain. And I remember thinking, no way. But shortly after that, I got into organic chemistry and realized that medical was not my future either. And when I came home and said, you know, what I really want to do is join the Navy, everybody went, yep, we knew it. I mean, every cousin, every friend, every ex-girlfriend, mother, dad, uncles, they all said, yep, that's right. We knew that's what you were going to do. And as soon as I got in the Navy, I felt like that's where I really belonged. It's a great feeling, and all the issues that they talked about with leadership and character, those are all true. But I think as for me anyway, when I'm coming out of the service and looking at the real world or the civilian world, the first thing that hit me that was different from being in the Navy was we had meetings to talk about the meetings we needed to have to talk about what we were going to do. And that was kind of really foreign to me. In the Navy, and I think in every branch of service, they have a similar story. Ship's underway. By sunup the next morning, we're going to be in position to be eye to eye with the ship that we are blockading. And there's nothing going to change that. We are heading that way. And you are either ready or you are not. And we're ready. That's what the military is. We are ready when it comes. And I think that's the reason the things have happened to me in my career. When I got out of the Navy, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I had done a lot of education, so that's where I went. And things have just fallen in place for me. It's like that ship underway, heading somewhere. And all I had to do was be just what I always was, and that's ready. Ready for whatever the case is, whatever comes up. And that's what I see in the military when I see my colleagues that are fellow veterans. That's the same thing I see in them. No matter what you walk in the door with, I can walk in and say, you know what? Today, there was a really bad accident in a welding lab in this college, and whatever we had planned today is going to change because we got to work on that, make sure everybody's safe, make sure the people that may have been injured are taken care of, and all those kinds of things. And the veterans immediately stand up and they're ready to go, and they just move towards that. We sit kind of politely in those meetings talking about the meetings we're going to have, waiting, ready to execute, because we already know what we need to do, and we already know how to do it, and we just execute. And that I think is the key thing that I brought with me when I came from the Navy, other than the fact that just everything that I did in the Navy, and I think everybody I knew in the military joined the military for bigger reasons, to be a part of something that's larger than themselves. And there's nothing larger than defending the nation that you belong to. And the United States, in my opinion, is still the greatest nation in the world. And to ever have been a part of defending that nation, showing the flag around the world, showing the American culture, that's a good feeling. And that passion, and then the always being ready, that's what makes military veterans good in the civilian world, and that's what makes them successful in the military world. There's a picture of my wife and I heading out just before we went to a Navy ball there, down that one. Family, I included that because the family is important, and it's harder when you're deployed. So you have to be ready to take on your family and deal with the things that families deal with in the short time that you have, in short intervals that you have with them. And so all of that closes in on what I think really makes a veteran a really good colleague to have with you, because no matter what happens, no matter what pops up that day, and there's always something that pops up during the day, you're ready and you're set. And that's what the military sets in us, and that's where we do well in the civilian world. The one last thing I want to close with is other than the fact that they talk about what they want to talk about, I didn't see a whole lot of real differences in the civilian world from the military. I mean, there's those overt things. When the general walks in, you stand and salute if you're outside. In the Navy, if you're inside, I guess the Army salutes anyway, right? And so those kinds of things don't happen in the civilian world, but you know who the boss is, and you give the boss that chain of command is still there and it still exists. So with that, I'm going to close, and thank you for your time. Appreciate you. Thanks.
Closing out Vet Talks, our final speaker. John Phillips is a very good friend of mine, and we started VetAtlanta together. And he's been our vice president since the very beginning 6 years ago. John is one of the most passionate veteran advocates I know. In addition to his role with VetAtlanta, John is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel where he served as artillery officer and comptroller, which two things should never go together, right? John is also retired from Coca-Cola Company where he was a finance director and also led several veteran initiatives while at Coca-Cola, including the Veterans Business Resource Group and Veterans Day events. He is also best-selling author of Boots to Loafers, Finding Your New True North. Please join me in welcoming to the stage, John Phillips.
Thank you, Lloyd. So that's my dad, 30-year infantry, landed on Omaha Beach. Very proud of him. This is interesting. A lot of great stories. I'm going to cover 3 topics. I retired from the Army 20 years ago. We barely had the internet. So the advantage that veterans have today, or those even on active duty that are making the transition out, you have so many resources at your fingertips, and if you don't take advantage of that, you're nuts. And the second thing you're nuts about is, if you don't take advantage of your post-9/11 GI Bill, you're absolutely nuts, because that's free education right there. But I want to talk about 3 things: work ethic, cultural diversity, and uncertainty. Work ethic. The one thing I found out when I transitioned out, and I literally transitioned. I left the Army on a Friday. I was lucky. I was an aide to a 3-star. So I just walked into the general and I said, well, I got an opportunity to go to Coca-Cola. Can I need to, they've made me an offer. I'm going to go. And he says, you need to take it and you need to go. Well, I out-processed in literally 2 weeks. I was gone. So I left the Army on a Friday and started at Coca-Cola on a Monday. Work ethic. I found out very, very quickly that I had a lot to learn. A new language, a new way to walk, a new way to talk, definitely a new way to dress. I had to wear a suit. And these Johnson & Murphy shoes were killing my feet because I had some great combat boots that were custom made by a Korean guy at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And I loved those boots, but I couldn't get away with wearing those at Coca-Cola. So I went out and got some nice Johnson & Murphys, and in my feet, I had blisters. It was ugly, and I walked funny and all that. But work ethic, I discovered very quickly, I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be in the office at 4 a.m. turning the lights on, because I knew I had a lot to learn coming from a military career to the corporate career. And I did that for quite a few months. I literally was turning the lights on, and oftentimes I was turning the lights off at the end of the day. That paid big, big dividends. I think those in the corporate America, if you're going to hire a vet, that's a work ethic. That work ethic that they bring with them is going to pay dividends for you, because people understand what they've got to do to succeed, and they can help you along the way. Cultural diversity. Think about it. In my 20-year career, I spent half of my career overseas, between Europe, the Middle East, and the U.S. 10 years in the U.S., most of my time in Europe and the Middle East. I understood culture. I understood the differences between how I lived, how I talked, how I interacted with people in the United States versus Egypt, Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, any country in Europe. You have to change how you think. That is a competitive advantage for companies. And if companies hadn't figured that out, they're losing. So you take a vet that has that vast experience overseas and put them into a position where they can go to the Middle East, for example, and they can make a difference day one because they understand the culture. And any of you that have been deployed in the Middle East, you understand this very quickly. The culture's like 180 degrees different than ours. And if you don't understand it and you offend somebody, it can get ugly very, very quickly. The third topic, uncertainty, ambiguity. I have it in my book, Boots to Loafers. I talk about ambiguity. It's the dance floor that we dance on in the military. There is so much uncertainty. There is so much change that happens. You don't have time to sit around and bitch and moan about it. You just move on and you get the mission done, or you get the task done, and then you debrief it, you make corrections, and you keep going. I think that is one of the biggest things I can equate this to is being our field artillery officer. When I was a fire support officer to the maneuver, I would go in and I would have to develop a fire support plan. I'd have to talk to the aviators. I'd have to talk to naval gunfire. I'd have to talk to the Air Force guys. I'd have to go to the rear and talk to them. And then I'd have to talk to everybody, attack helicopter, everybody. You got to incorporate this into a fire support plan to support the maneuver commander. I translated that over to the corporate world as a finance guy and built me the wonderful process, and I'm sure UPS goes through this, the annual business planning process, which seems to take an entire year. It's crazy. It's the same thing, though. You're going out and you're talking to supply chain, you're talking to operations, you're talking to everyone inside the company because you got to put together a plan. It's just there's numbers. It's really no big deal. All of these skills are transferable. So when you put together your work ethic, you're going to get to work on time. You're going to stay a little bit extra if you have to. I mean, even when I started at Coke, I didn't leave before the boss left. That's real military right there. I sat at my desk and I would just wait. And they're like, what are you doing? Well, you're not gone yet. They're like, what are you even talking about? You know, you would stand up in the conference room when which one brought it up? You stand up in the conference room when the boss walks in, everybody's looking at you like, what's up with this dude? So it's really it's that transition process, but over time that stuff kind of weans away. But if you've got the good work ethic, which I really truly believe 99.9% of our veterans have got that, you understand how to operate in different cultures inside your company, inside different countries and things, and the company takes advantage of you to do that, to take you into a position to do that. And then uncertainty. You don't get all bent out of shape and you can't get your work done. You just kind of deal with it and you move on. You put those things together, you bring someone in that has that military background, you got a winner. But the key point is you got to capitalize on that. My last comment to any person out there that is either on active duty and transitioning into the private sector or even veterans inside companies. Never, ever sell yourself short. You know more than you think you do. Just think about that and think about what you did while you served in uniform. You really got to think hard about that. And then you can translate that into what can I do for the company I'm working for now. So never sell yourself short, even if you're a tanker. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Providing the closing comments for VetLanta Vet Talks will be VetLanta board member Krista DeKruger.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me here to close this afternoon out. I am not a veteran, but I sure do support you all. I have had the opportunity to work at the Intrepid Museum, where we honored our heroes, educated the public, and inspired our youth about the price of freedom. I worked for a small company that led the Marine Civilian Development Program, where we helped transitioning Marines and their spouses. And then I worked at Wounded Warrior Battalion West, where I worked with wounded, ill, and injured Marines and sailors, and also their spouses as caretakers to help them transition to the civilian world. And now I get to continue my work as part of VetLanta. I'm taking pictures all the time, social media, and getting the word out about VetLanta, which is our premier community for veterans. We're helping to make Atlanta the premier community for veterans and their families. Please do check us out on vetlanta.org. Introduce yourself, join our LinkedIn private group where we post opportunities for veterans and military spouses for them to help with transition and settling in here to Atlanta. I wanted to wrap up with some highlights, recaps for those looking to hire a veteran or for those veterans who are looking to what they can say on their next interview. Mark Robinson talking about the fundamental of being a Marine, the discipline that he learned from being a Marine. Dr. Greentree, resiliency. Bill Dyer, a leader whose currency is values. This is what you're bringing to the team. Joe Dan Baker, you're ready. And John Phillips, work ethic, cultural diversity, and ambiguity. Thank you. Help from the audience there. I called a friend. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank UPS for hosting this great event. It is National Veterans and Military Families Month, which I always knew. My husband is a Marine, retired Marine. His birthday is on November 1st, but we celebrate on November 10th this year, the 244th birthday of the Marine Corps. We have Veterans Day coming up November 11th. It's really such a great month to be thankful for you all. And I wouldn't be a leader, a team lead here at VetLanta if I didn't stress that the opportunity for veterans and those who want to support veterans come out on December 11th in Atlanta for the VetLanta Q4 Summit hosted by the Georgia National Guard. It's a great time to get involved, offer your help and support, and to get information if you are a veteran or a military spouse. Thank you all and have a great afternoon.